Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation in the weekly nonprofit series, People in Fundraising. And today is Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. I'm very excited to welcome today's guest to our program, Mario Hernandez, who is likely a very well-known content thought leader on LinkedIn to many people in the People in Fundraising world and other ecosystems on social impact channels within LinkedIn. Mario, it's great to have you here today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Tim. You can definitely find me always on LinkedIn, so that's generally the best place to contact me. I'm spending all of my day or hours there on that platform. You can always look up my Impact Circle or on our website, impactcircle.network. And we'll always be able to reach out, book a call, friendly call, just to understand what the organization is all about, what you're working on, and just always look out for the content. We're providing free value, free resources. So we're very, very passionate about the sector and just wanting to support it any way that we can. So thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's good to put the content that's very informative that you generate on LinkedIn with your name, with your face today. So I'm looking forward to our chat.
Oh, likewise, right here, Tim. I was looking forward to this. And again, thank you for making this happen. I know you were very flexible with me. So very excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, as we always start each interview, and this is now almost 4 years of programming, I always ask each guest if they can first share with our audience how they entered the fundraising profession, roughly how long they've been in it, and if you want to catalog some of your roles, institutions to get to where you are today, that would be awesome, Mario.
Well, Tim, thanks again. I've got an interesting journey, like many do, but mine really began in college in Babson, where everybody was doing a consulting competition for large Fortune 500 companies. And I went towards the one nonprofit that was kind of lonely in the table. They were called Earthwatch Institute. And we were able to do a semester-long competition of business practices for the organization where we're competing with all the other students. And we ended up winning that competition. And so that always stuck with me. I was extremely passionate about the work that they were doing. And, sincerely speaking, I wasn't thinking that I would be entering the nonprofit sector. I left and was an entrepreneur for over 20 years, building startups, having exits in that entire world. But I did see a lot of overlaps between raising investments for a startup and fundraising within the nonprofit sector. So that itch was always there, and I needed to come back to the sector. And so it's been in the last year that we've been able to do so because I was fortunately able to raise $1 million through LinkedIn. So always seeing those overlaps told me that a sector that does the most amazing work, the most necessary work for all these societal issues, are receiving less of the support that I saw anyway in the world of startups. So I decided to dive in with my co-founders, and now fortunately we've worked with over hundreds of organizations, teaching them the process of how to use LinkedIn for their fundraising efforts. But that's really where my journey began. So we're new to the sector. Humbly speaking, we're always looking to learn, be surrounded by individuals like yourself, those that have been here for a long time, and give our 2 cents of what we've seen anyway work, and what's been working internally as well. But we're very grateful to be here and just want to help out as much as we can.
That's awesome. Well, I am glad to have you back on the nonprofit side with your entrepreneurial expertise. And that's a nice segue, Mario, to the second question here. You talked about LinkedIn. And one of the things, as I did research for our interview today, that caught my eye is that you have developed an online training program that's quite popular called, quote, Live LinkedIn Bootcamp, end quote, for nonprofits. So really curious, what led you to develop this? What can you share about the boot camp with our audience that, if they're interested to hear more, and where can they find out more?
Thanks again, Tim. So what we saw was that, and I was seeing this again in the for-profit sector for many years, and startups struggling to find investments for their businesses. And so, fortunately, I found a very much relationship first approach that paved its way to raising that funding for my startup itself. Now, it took me a long time knocking my head, various times as well, where we had to get away from that pitch first mentality,
Mm.
resisting the temptation. That happens again, those overlaps between startups and nonprofits. I mean, you're in that scarcity mindset, you got so much pressure. It's only natural sometimes to lean towards that temptation. But once you resist as much as you can and start building off that relationship, start developing, obtaining that trust and earning it, it fortunately opens up those doors. So once I got back into the sector, what I was realizing was, well, one, does this success story that I was able to live, fortunately myself, does it apply to nonprofits? Secondly, we did a lot of research. So it was understanding that a lot of nonprofits, as you well know, are on Instagram, on TikTok, Facebook,
Right.
Meta, and so forth. But realistically, from the research we saw, only about 48 to 49% of nonprofits are actually active on LinkedIn. So
Mm.
naturally, the question then began, well, given the political landscape, given the economic situation and circumstances that we're finding the sector in, CSR is on the rise. And the one question that we ask nonprofits is, well, where do you connect with business professionals, CSR directors, marketing executives, and so forth?
Mhm.
And naturally, they would think LinkedIn. And I'll say, well, are you active on LinkedIn? And the answer then would go, no. And so it was very much of understanding that they just didn't have the education behind it.
Yeah.
Secondly, they didn't realize the power of personal branding, not just an organizational page, but the power of personal branding, to have that face, to be able to transmit that level of trust in what the organization does, and that there is a system to the circus that is LinkedIn of understanding profile, content creation, sending the DMs, booking a call, and so forth.
Mm.
And so, after helping so many nonprofit organizations, we realized that this is a real issue that they need to get on. They need to be able to actually raise that awareness, that visibility, and it plays off to so many things from corporate partnerships to volunteers to finding board members. All the decision makers are on LinkedIn, and
Right.
fortunately enough, now it's becoming a major, major platform for the sector. But there still needs to be a very strong educational component around to it, so it doesn't become time consuming, but that time that's invested in there actually results in dollars funded or dollars generated as well for the organization.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And as you were talking, Mario, I was thinking about my own employer, which is Weber State University here in northern Utah. I'm in the conference room here today. And I know that our university president is very active on LinkedIn. And before he became president here, he was the vice president of institutional advancement. So he came from fundraising. Very active on LinkedIn, sharing the good message about uh, the mission of Weber State and the students we try to attract and help in life. My vice president, I'm active on it, but I don't actually know if Weber State as an institution has a LinkedIn account. I know I just came out of a meeting where someone from the marketing communications team talked about the Instagram account for the Weber State Alumni Association. So I think there are kind of some institutional subsets, and I could just be completely wrong. Maybe we do have one, but it made me really think like, yeah, that's right. I often follow the thought leadership without following the institution. And I would wager that a lot of people fall into that trap as well. Do you see
It's
that?
very true. Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely the case. And it's one of those things where you have to have the institutional page or the organizational page for reputation, transparency, credibility. It's the place to go to understand how many employees, company website, years since being incorporated, and so forth. But generally speaking, unless, and respectfully so, unless you're Microsoft, Google, OpenAI now, and so forth, those posts just don't generate a lot of traction, and people generally don't like to receive a direct message from the organization. because
Yeah.
then it says, X organization sending you a message, hello, great to meet you. And you don't receive a first name, a last name. You don't know who you're speaking to, who's the face behind that, and so forth. So there's definitely a necessity to having that institutional page. But in terms of just developing those relationships, it has to come from that personal profile itself.
Yeah.
And we've been seeing the same case with a lot of educational institutions, what you mentioned. They haven't been leveraging LinkedIn as much, even though their alumni are all either starting businesses or are in all these different types of organizations where they can amplify the level of either donations, outreach, visibility, support to the university, type of
Yeah.
events, and so forth. So there's a lot of potential there to be explored again with the platform.
That's great. Thank you. How often do you run your live LinkedIn boot camp, and where can people find more info on that, please?
Thank you, Tim. So we generally run the boot camp once a month. A few
Mhm.
months that we either take a break or just out of like conferences that we're attending and we're sponsoring and so forth.
Yeah.
For example, the next one's running right now in the month of October, and we're going to have the next one in November. And then we're going to be taking the December break, just being respectful as well for the section of the holidays. And then it'll restart again in January.
Okay.
And basically, they are 2 weeks of two sessions a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. CST. Each one is recorded. If for any reason the participants can't join the course itself, they can go through the recordings. We have a live WhatsApp channel as well for continuous support.
Yeah.
We onboard them also onto our Impact Hub, which is a standalone service for being part of the cohort. We give them access to that as well, where they can get plenty of resources, trainings, workshops, webinars from third-party individuals that just want to come and teach, whether it's AI, SEO optimization,
Wow.
board assembly, etc.
Yeah.
So they get a lot of support, and they get access to consultants that are also within the Impact Hub, and they don't charge anything additionally. They just want to give their time and volunteer and support it in any way. So for that information, definitely either contact me on LinkedIn or go to impactcircle.network. And there you're going to see all the information of the cohort itself, the upcoming cohort. And you can start either inquiring, asking questions, and then just ultimately, if they're interested, participating. It's been really successful. We've had work with $10 million plus organizations to the grassroots organizations that are
Yeah.
just getting started and they want to start building up a pipeline. So it's very flexible to be able to meet the needs of those organizations.
That's wonderful. What a great resource for the nonprofit world. And when your interview airs later this fall, I will put a link to the boot camp when your interview goes on LinkedIn in the comments section so people can access that information. So thank you for sharing all that, Mario. I appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate that, Tim, as well. Thanks for putting in that link. That's always helpful as well. I always it's my LinkedIn persona. I always suggest putting in the links, like as you mentioned, in the comments, just because LinkedIn's algorithm, whenever they see it within the post and they think they're taking you elsewhere, they lessen the visibility. So that I can't help myself. I apologize for that.
Well, that's something I'd only recently learned about LinkedIn because I would sometimes put a link in the narrative that I do for each week's post, and then I find out, yeah, that's why that post got like 4 reactions. So,
That's definitely the case. And, LinkedIn's changing their algorithm quite frequently as well.
yeah,
Some people get a little nervous around that, but the most important thing, like anything in life, really is just showing up. Keep showing
yes,
up, keep being consistent, and being value driven. The more value that you can provide, the better it'll always go, and for not to be too concerned about the number of reactions or number of comments. There's a lot of silent lurkers that are reading your content daily or whenever you're posting, but they're just not reacting to it, and they're
yeah,
absolutely either fans of your work, they love what you do, fans of your organization, and then ultimately they will reach out. They'll reach out via DMs or via email. They'll find their way. So just
yeah.
something to always keep in mind, because it's natural to feel a little deflated and that still happens to me. You put a post that you put a lot of time into it, and all of a sudden the reactions don't pop out, but the value is elsewhere.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that is a great bridge to the next question here. And we teed it off as I introduced you, Mario, at the beginning of the hour. You're a very active an insightful content creator on LinkedIn. And as a podcaster myself, I'm always curious to learn from people like you as you share actionable and interesting content, often, multiple times a week. So my question for you would be, do you have a routine? Do you keep a list in terms of topics of what you want to post about? Do you have them kind of maybe as you've posted, you've learned, okay, this day at this time, not this day, and definitely not at this time of the day? Maybe doing some your own analysis in terms of getting people to opt in to and seeing your content. So if you want to take that part, and then I've got a follow up after that, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. So what you've mentioned is exactly spot on. I'm quite, let's say, methodical. As
Okay.
for the way that I like to go about it. I definitely have the timing of my day. Generally, I post on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always around 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. CST.
Uh,
This isn't like the golden standard. Sometimes you're going to read respectfully from other content creators that there's an exact timing that you should be posting on LinkedIn.
mm,
I'm more of the belief that you start studying or understanding where your audience is really coming in from. Sometimes, whether it's people that are actually reading it are more in the East Coast or Pacific
right.
Standard Time, or maybe they're in Europe. That all depends on how you've been building up that community. And then you double down on that. So if it's been very much working for you at 7 a.m., then that's something you can go ahead and schedule the post so you're not stressing out while you're making breakfast to be posting at the same time. But I'm quite methodical on that. Absolutely. There is a content calendar that I create myself that I help our clients with also, because we all have to understand that there's so many things that they're already working on. They're completely overwhelmed with the impact that they're providing, whether it's running the business, the organization, how they're going about it, and so forth. And so that's where AI comes into play. And I teach them
Mm,
how to leverage AI very effectively, but not to write your comments, not to write your post. Is just to be able to actually brainstorm a month long worth of content creation so that there is a variety in the style, variety in the value, what you're going to be discussing, who you're celebrating, what you're discussing, whether you're highlighting your partners and so forth. So there's an incredible formula to all of that, because
mm.
people will naturally get bored if it's kind of the same thing every single day. And if you're thinking about it on a daily basis, you get saturated or you start getting to be burnt out. And so all those things you want to be able to minimize, reduce. That's what technology is there for, to be able to let you focus on relationship building. But it
Yeah,
can help you absolutely create that content calendar so it's very efficient and effective towards the organization and the mission that you're on.
that's great. That's good advice there. Thank you. And as you mentioned, another really important vehicle in your LinkedIn boot camp. So this is the follow-up. So when new content ideas come to you, and you're a very busy and engaged nonprofit leader, and you've got a young family, how might you capture those ideas to be, I've got a bit of an idea, but I'm in a meeting, or I got a bit of an idea and I'm, you know, helping with childcare or something like that. What might you do to say, I don't want to lose track of that particular thought?
So I'm definitely one to either have my notes on my iPhone, wherever you have it, whether you use Android or anything else. Where can you type something down? Because like those ideas that just come into mind at a difficult timing anyway, you don't want to lose out. So it's like
Yeah.
write that down, and then sometimes I write that idea, and I even utilize ChatGPT or Claude to expand that idea, so you can
Oh,
repurposing that content itself. But generally, never lose sight of it. Write it down very quickly, and you have to come back to it itself. That's always been very helpful for myself. So I always have either ChatGPT open, or I
mhm.
be writing down. And sometimes if I'm going on a run, if I'm going on a workout, and that's where your creative juices start flowing anyway, I
Yeah.
also use a lot of the voice notes. That also helps me. So whatever is most efficient, definitely always jot them down, because you and I were just discussing, right, that I'm pretty methodical with my content. At the same time, I am not strict on just being like, well, write a post in that moment. Might not be the best moment for your audience, that also gives you a different opportunity. It might capture a different audience that's not accustomed to that time, and they're going to see it for the very first time. And it just comes out very passionate. So that's also the beauty, right, in this era of AI, when people realize that it was completely human written, very passionate. It
Right.
makes spelling errors. It wasn't the most thought out post with the formatting and all this structure, but it makes it very human. And people are resonating to that powerfully today as well.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about some of your posts that I've seen as you were just answering that follow-up question, and you often will include a photo of yourself or family members out being outside. I think you've been on a boat in some posts with your spouse, and that really humanizes the content. I hadn't even heard your voice until a half hour ago, but I'm like, okay, like I now know a little bit about Mario outside of the work he does and outside of the content he's putting on the platform. And yeah, like it makes me want to be more engaged and look forward to what's he going to say next. So I'm a big fan of that approach.
No, thank you, Tim. And honestly, so my wife jokes around with me quite a lot because I'm the worst Instagram person. Facebook, I'm not a big social media guy. And the thing is, I guess I just don't see LinkedIn as social media. I see it very much as a different platform, a very
Yes,
professional
same.
network. And to that point as well, sometimes I'm a big believer there's that word audience, but then there's community. We have to do that
Yeah.
evolution. Building an audience is very different than building a community. And so when you start paying attention to that community, they sometimes start selecting what your brand looks like, basically.
Mm,
I started realizing that they very much resonated with the fact that I'm a big family person. That's where my
yeah.
values come from. I love spending time with my family, with my wife, with my son. And so I like to just showcase being outside, not having that rigid structure that you do see very much on LinkedIn. It has to be carousels, it has to be infographics, and so forth. Um, I might be able to get more reactions if I went elsewhere. But what again I want to build is less of an audience and more of a community. So I love putting on those family pictures, being very humanized, as you well mentioned, so that
Yeah,
people can realize that at the end of the day, we're just here to talk to one another, not give it too much thought, and then still provide a lot of value. So whatever works for you. Sometimes it could be content or carousels is your thing. Well, it's not an either or. Go for it.
right.
If it's just yourself, then do that as well. If it's pictures of you playing golf, etc., definitely see what resonates with your community, where they're very much resonating, and then double down and triple down on that as well.
Totally. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to the beginning of our interview here when you talked about being an entrepreneur and your several successful exits, and then returning back to the social impact sector. And I'm just curious, are there leadership lessons from your time out of the nonprofit world that you draw upon, that you reflect on, you implement from that time in your career and your life to now as the co-founder of the Impact Circle and all of the initiatives you do for social impact work?
Oh, absolutely. It's something that I think about very frequently.
Mm,
Something that I speak a lot on, by the way, as an international keynote speaker because of those parallels. It really provides me a huge passion because of the fact that I saw so many of the startup struggles related in the nonprofit sector. Now, the reason why is that there's also this cultural, let's say, perspective
mm,
in the world of startups. They give it a lot of this like celebrity status when they see these
yeah,
startups raising the millions of funds and the seed rounds, etc, because they also very much designate these startup founders to be very bold, to be very fearless. They're celebrating their mistakes and their challenges and so forth. And
yeah.
so I always felt that it was quite, let's say, unfair that in the nonprofit sector, we don't celebrate it as much. When
That's
there
true.
is a failure by a founder, and failure is still a strong word to me, but a challenge that they've gone through, whether it was a marketing campaign that just didn't work out, they get scrutinized, they get very heavily criticized. Those are impact dollars that are being spent on, etc. So that's where I start seeing, well, the leadership component that they have to be able to invest. They have to be able to invest into marketing. They have to invest in their teams. They have to be willing to failure forward the way that we celebrate in the startup world,
Right.
because that's the only way that we're actually going to see sustainable financial success for these organizations. We're
Sure.
going to be able to attract the best employees that we can actually obtain from these high level corporations, not to the nonprofit sector that very much needs it. And so those startup parallels with nonprofits is something that I very much like to talk about,
Mm.
that we have to empower also. I'm very much a proponent of executive education, whether it's MBA, whether it's actually leadership programs. And so that's another component. When I was at Harvard, I was next to individuals from Salesforce, Google, Meta, etc. And I was like, well, where are the ones from the nonprofit sector? How come those organizations
Right.
and the board members aren't incentivizing that enough, even though it's obviously a significant investment that they have to be making into it? But these other companies are doing so because it obviously pays off exponentially. We need
Right.
to do the same. And we need to get them to understand that those are necessary expenses, that how impact related are they at the moment? Well, it's exponential impact that comes down the road, right? So that's where I see a lot of that. I like to talk about it. I definitely want the sector to empower it even more so, and something that we need to keep top of mind to stop being so focused on the short-term donation dollars and long-term growth for the stability again of the organization.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, you mentioned speaking as a keynote on international conferences. Other, others that, other conferences that you routinely speak at that you want to mention by name and, you know, how you get tied into that world?
Yeah, so absolutely. I'm getting quite involved into everything from the philanthropic conferences
Mm.
to impact awards for entrepreneurial endeavors. My ethos in that whole regard is always creating that bridge, right, between the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector. And ultimately getting them to understand again the power of LinkedIn, because both of those worlds live on the same platform.
Right.
However,
Yeah.
they're not connecting or conversing with one another.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that we've also seen the nonprofit sector, or it would seem that they're the ones asking for support from corporations. And I like to flip it around
Mm.
because of this generational shift that's happening in the workplace. Employees are now purpose driven, they're millennials, they're Gen Z. 75% of the workforce is now completely purpose driven. So
Yeah.
they're facing an entire new landscape internally where they need to actually do impact driven work. And what better partner to do so than the nonprofit sector? So
Right.
instead of having that mentality of asking for that support, it's got to be mutual respect, mutual value on the table, same conversation. And now, how can they get benefit from one another? So
Mm.
that's where I'm now expanding those conferences, and again, just empowering to do so all via LinkedIn, because all their stakeholders are there. So I'm
Right.
going to be incrementing that even further in 2026, both in the US and in Europe, just because Europe has to learn a little bit more of the philanthropic nature that we've seen in the US and how altruistic the companies have been and how successful they've been because of it.
Yes. And on that note, Mario, you talked just now about the generational shift and how the generation coming up behind me, I'm 50, they're much more purpose driven. So, how do you adjust your boot camp and your speaking, your public speaking? What refinements do you make to make sure that you're talking to everyone, but you are maybe zeroing in on this upcoming generation that will soon enter nonprofit leadership with their own lived experiences and that purpose-driven mentality?
That's a great question. It very much comes down to understanding a little bit of that research.
Mm.
Who's behind the company? How long has the company been around? Who are the thought leaders or decision makers of that company? And then seeing that age range. Nevertheless, those let's say are older individuals are facing this new wave of generation where you see it a lot written in the articles and public media saying, well, they utilize words that I don't resonate with, like saying, "Oh, it's a lazy generation." Are they not doing the right work? Is because they don't understand it fully well, and so now they're asking themselves the same questions. Well, how do we keep them motivated? Employee engagement as has been at its worst in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
from a Gallup report, for example. So how do we motivate them? There's remote work. How do we keep them motivated? So when we're talking to that older generation, we've been able to recommend and suggest to the nonprofits that we work with that they have to be able to discuss in a very much, let's say, corporate vocabulary. So talking about employee engagement, talking about customer retention, customer transparency, how is that affecting revenue margins, etc. Now, as we go lower to the younger generations that are leading startups and they're building their enterprises and their entrepreneurial endeavors, now the vocabulary shifts completely,
Yes.
where it is much more engaging and saying, hey, listen, let's co-collaborate on these initiatives so that you're very well positioned as your impact rise and that your work is completely transparent, et cetera. So
Mm.
shifting that vocabulary always starts with the research of who you're going to be discussing with and who's leading it, who are the decision makers, and what stage they're in currently. And then that way you can actually shift your proposal very adequately and very strategically.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We have about 7 minutes left in the program, 7 to 10 minutes. I want to get to this question number five. I always like to hear for people that work in the nonprofit world, what experience as a donor yourself has been the most meaningful to you, Mario? And a follow-up, if you could just describe, what made it very meaningful for you, please.
No, it's there's so many initiatives and so many causes that it's always difficult to pick one.
Yeah.
One that's been very close to our heart because we did it recently, actually, is we've been building a house in Mexico in Ensenada.
Mm.
And again, we're always about bridging the two sectors. And the reason that was just so powerful is because we travel with 30 high impact entrepreneurs. They're from the nonprofit sector or they're leading these eight-figure companies or multi-exited founders, but they want to go beyond just the donation or writing a check. They want to feel the impact. So we met up in San Diego, in California. We traveled to Ensenada, and we spent the entire weekend just building a house for this family in need. And we get to go to an orphanage. We play football. We just hang out, but we go beyond just talking about profit margins or revenue generation, et cetera, to really understanding how that impact, that transformative experience changes our lives and the bonds that are created together. So everybody leaves off, and these corporate partnerships are formed very naturally between
Mm.
both sectors, where they get to have discussions, they get to understand one another, they get to share their challenges, what they haven't resonated with in the past, what they're nervous about politically, economically, etc.
Yeah.
But just seeing those conversations has been very profound. So we had it. The last house we built was the first week of October. We
Oh,
did it in February earlier this year as well. So that very much, yeah, very close to my heart. We worked alongside the Impact Movement Foundation. They've been doing it for about 10 years or so. So
oh,
grateful for that foundation and the good work that they've been doing. And we hope to do it a lot more times next year as well.
that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Mario. I think when we were trying to schedule today's interview, you had even mentioned I can't do this particular week because you'll be building this house. So I mean, it's great to have the idea and the funding, but then to be on the ground and doing the work and connecting. It gets back to what you mentioned earlier about the community building aspect. And that's great.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Tim, and we're grateful to everybody that participated. We we love to practice what we preach, basically. Like
Yeah.
all the corporate partnerships that we were able to find for that house build that we're so grateful for, um, came through LinkedIn, through just
Wow.
connection calls, the way that we're doing. So that's what we're always wanting to be transparent to the organizations that we work with, is that as a company ourselves, as the Impact Circle, we're doing it every single time. So when we're actually going to be building this house, we were looking for those corporate partners.
Mm.
And those were just conversations that we were able to have, building up those relationships. They believed in the project, they saw the impact, we were able to be transparent about it. And now they're lifelong partners also. So it's been a wonderful experience. LinkedIn has always changed my life. I think my wife thinks I'm obsessed with it. I have a problem, but fortunately, it's been an incredible platform because now I'm having a conversation with you today as well. And who knows where
Totally.
this is going to yield and the relationship as to where it's going to go. So I'm grateful for that. It's nobody's unreachable nowadays. So
Yeah.
whoever you want to reach, whoever you've always thought of or you've been in an admiration of, reach out. And incredibly enough, just put in the time, the work, and that human first approach, and it can definitely happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that just reminds me of a quote from a friend of mine who was a previous guest, a mentor to me professionally, Nida Janiskus, who I worked with at Harvard Business School. Then she went from there to INSEAD outside Paris. And she once said to me, if you don't ask, you won't get. And I think that applies to what you just said here, Mario. Like, yes, most everyone is reachable. All you need to do is ask. So that's,
That's a great quote. It's exactly the case. I think sometimes it goes into that educational component. A lot of the times we place on these self-limiting beliefs, right?
yes.
Um, and I had the same thing. I only got active on LinkedIn in March last year, and so
Oh,
it's the same thing. What do people actually want to hear from me? Do I actually have something of value to say? Who's going to want to connect with me? I was just starting off that startup, and so when you remove those self-limiting factors, when you take that courage to get out there, and it definitely is scary, it can be fearful, depending on your personality and so forth, but start taking action and you're going to be surprised at the people that you're connecting with. And right now, the events that I'm being invited to, the rooms that I'm in and so forth, you still feel like this is really happening, but it's just because you're taking action. So as you very well mentioned and your friend mentioned, it's so true. Go out there, ask, and just be interested in others. And that's going to pave the way forward.
Absolutely. I totally agree with those pieces of advice because I'm living it in a way that, to start this podcast, like I'm a prospect management guy. I don't, you know, I don't externally talk to donors in my day job, but just being able to build that community here and to invite great people like yourself is a real treat for me. So I've just really appreciated the time connecting with you today, Mario.
The feeling's absolutely mutual, Tim. I was looking forward to this. Thank you for having me. I hope to start LinkedIn Lives after my daughter is born in
Yeah.
January. So once I do, we'd love to have you on there as well, host you, just because of the incredible work that you're doing and the good that you're doing as well for the community. So I'm very thankful for it.
Well, thank you. And I wish you and your family all the best with the upcoming new addition to your family. And I hope that, yes, we'd be happy to connect with you um, sometime early in 2026. And thanks again for your time today, Mario.
Sam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and wishing you the very best for the rest of the year as well.
Thank you. And for our audience, on these notes of gratitude, so I want to say thank you for your support over the last almost 4 years of People in Fundraising. Whether you tune in on Podbean or you watch the full content on YouTube or my website, I thank everyone for your support. You can find Mario Hernandez's conversation on these multiple channels later this fall, 2025. LinkedIn, every Monday we post interviews. The LinkedIn post will have a link to the audio only Podbean, the AV on YouTube. And thanks to my 100th guest, Luis Diaz of WISE and the Donor Participation Project. He is sponsoring my website, peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. So across those channels, you'll be able to find Mario's conversation. And thanks again. And we'll be back next week with another interview. And Mario, I look forward to continuing following your content.
Very grateful for it, Tim, and grateful for everybody listening in. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.